Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jennifer Zabasaja in New York. Thanks so much for joining us today for what I'm hoping is going to be a really exciting roundtable on the digital future of sports. So even before the pandemic, the global sports industry was trying to figure out a way to utilize technology to retain their current viewers, but also get new viewers. And what we saw over the past 15 months really changed the sports industry and really changed the way that they are having to embrace digitization. So today we have a really great lineup of panelists who are experts in the field and are ready to talk about this. You can see some of them here. So I'm really looking forward to this. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And let's just get right to it. I mean, there's so much to talk about. George and Wayne, I kind of want to start with you guys, and then we'll open it up to everyone else. It's pretty, there's a consensus that Gen Zers and millennials don't watch or consume sports the way their parents did. But what did you see over the past 15 months that really sort of solidified that statement and made the people who you're working with in the sports industry rethink how they're using technology? George, maybe we'll start with you.
Okay, great. Well, listen, what we saw at the highest level was that our companies, we invested around the change in media consumption. And so our companies really weathered the pandemic extremely well. And actually, the pandemic accelerated digital technology. So while other parts of the ecosystem were hard hit, and I feel very badly about it growing up in sports, we saw the consumption of our products and services increase during the pandemic. So simply put, I'd just say that more than anything, we went through a tornado and came out of it in pretty good shape. And I wondered why. And the real reason is we invested behind data and technology.
Data and technology. Wayne, do you share that same sentiment? I mean, I wonder what it's like with some of the people that you've been working with.
Well, Jennifer, thanks for having me here. This is awesome. I mean, this is, for us at 76 Capital and the kinds of companies that we invest in all startups within the sports tech world, esports and sports betting industry. So it crosses all these different areas. So when you specifically talk about from a media perspective, it's been unbelievable, the types of new and innovations that are coming down the pike. I mean, look, we were all shocked by the NFL $110 billion plus deal, right? Those types of things make a difference. It's all about this idea of what new types of ways can you engage fans. And so whether that's through augmented reality, which we just recently invested in a company called Quintar around that, whether it's sort of the new type of fan engagement that you receive from a media perspective with one of our companies called C360, these are opportunities and ways for you to engage with the games, for fans to be able to engage and have multiple devices and multiple ways to really see the way things happen. And then, of course, you layer in sports betting into all of that. Maybe not for the kids, but for everybody else. I mean, that's the thing that's just so exciting. I mean, and that's where we've just seen incredible growth across this, and just the types of things we've seen from the side of where the big companies want this, so we've been really fortunate to, have had 3 big exits here this year in 2021 and around this industry, whether it's, and so a lot more we can talk about here.
So Wayne, on that note, is it that the big companies wanted this to go the way that it's going, or did they need it? I mean, in order for their live sports divisions to continue on? And I'm welcoming anyone else to jump in here too.
Well, I mean, I'll just jump in real quick, and then I think they want it, right? I think the one thing is that the big guys want it. So like when we built, the CNBC of sports betting, a 24-hour sports betting network called VSiN, which was started by Brent Musburger. We sold that to DraftKings. They needed it. They want it. They want to have it for their consumers. The next generation sports betting platform that Victory built, that's now owned by Fubo TV. Like they wanted it, right? That's an opportunity. Paul and I are investors in a company called Whistle Sports that was sold to 11 Sports in the middle of all this in Europe. And now they have a $360 million, media company, global media company that they're going to do some really special things to do around. So these are the kind of things that are happening in this industry right now.
Paul, what were you seeing in this industry? I mean, Wayne just mentioned Whistle Sports that you invested in. Why jump in the mix?
Well, I think getting back to your first question, that like the difference between millennials and Gen Zs and their consumption behavior, we've been for as long as professional sports have been distributed across television going back to the 60s and how the NFL built their business tied to that. We've been attached to Nielsen numbers and like the revenue tied to viewership and the CPM that's given to the broadcast or cable network that's distributing the games. And you have spots and dots and in-game features, and that's how the networks make their money partly. And then the other is the affiliate fee from the MVPDs. So what we're seeing more so with Gen Zs is the preference of consuming live sports on streaming platforms. Millennials are kind of in the middle, and I'm speaking as a millennial and also looking at the data, is that we actually favor sports more than our predecessors and our parents. We're watching more sports. We consume it through social. We're starting to get there on streaming, but we were actually pretty hesitant as a group, and so we're looking at our numbers, for example, in the kind of the future of distribution of sports away from broadcast cable and now broadcast streaming. Comcast as the nearest example of announcing that NBC Sports was going to be shut down, even though that's a profitable business for them, getting in front of 82 million households a year. And just looking at the future, to your second point, which is entertainment executives that were leading the charge of the streaming era, going to Netflix and to Amazon, and now what we're seeing across Disney Plus to Peacock and such, viewed that customer acquisition strategy as scripted and a little bit of unscripted. And what they've seen as we're tucking live sports into these streamers is that it's actually the most effective customer acquisition tool. And the LTV that they're tying to sports fans is far greater than what they anticipated. So at the executive level, sports executives are meeting with entertainment executives for the 5 major media conglomerates, and they're conjoining their strategies. And we're going to see more multiple ways of consuming sports. Our game's on NBC. It's also simulcasted on Peacock. We have unique viewers on both.
Right. Elise, I want to bring you into this. You wanted to share something.
So there's 2 things, and it literally takes off of what Paul and Wayne were talking about. And this is what I call fresh audiences, right? That's anybody who is in this generation, who is in the next generation, and the generations to come. But I call this like the snack and share culture. So it's the era of snackable content and shareable content. And so when you take a look at Gen Z, let's just say that's, post 1996, and let's just call them fresh audiences. They are so attuned to engaging and sharing short form content that immediately gets to the heart of a conversation. So the content that, sports properties or traditional sports properties, the benchmark for them really needs to be, how can I take this 2 to 3 hour event and turn it into something that is like or is shareable content? And that literally is related to, honestly, this new form of return on investment, this new form of revenue generation, because in the past, revenue generation for sports properties has been so tied to their rights holders and their sponsors. And that is also engaged now in digital platforms, which is where these fresh influencers live. So the ability to be able to understand that while rights deals still drive that revenue proposition, their growth year over year is much lower than the growth of these digital snackable content platforms that are growing by 100% a year. It's just as you go from generation to generation, you're going to get a larger percent of the population that is focused on short form. And that's when the pendulum is going to fit as it relates to the revenue value propositions that all sports ecosystems are going to have to deal with.
Right. So then on that note, Andre, you're a former athlete. Does the live sport element, spectators going out, packing into an arena or a stadium with thousands of people, does that still need to happen then if this new generation is consuming the snackable content?
All right. So, if I talk, first of all, I'm glad to be on the panel, but if I talk from the athlete perspective, of course I'm going to be selfish because I need the fans out there, right? Like I need that feeling of when I get a tackle and, the fans are screaming. Like I need that. All right, feed my ego a little bit, okay? So out there with no fans, I mean, it's going to be hard for me to enjoy the game as much because as athletes, we really do it for the fans. All right, so that'll be difficult. But I will say this, and a lot of times when we think of like Gen Zers and if you're from the South, the older folks, they say they have this Southern drawl. They'll say, well, these young whippersnappers these days, they just don't have the attention span that we had. All right. Like, they all say that. But I actually look at it like realistically, Gen Zers and younger millennials, it's not that they don't have the attention span, but they just want everything they can get as efficient as possible. And that's the thing. And so this is where I really get excited to where sports is going to, because at the end of the day, like, you still need sports to have highlights. Look, everybody knows you only need to watch a basketball game for the last 30 seconds to get the whole game, all right? Like, seriously. But you still have to have that basketball game to get to the last 30 seconds. You got to. And so what I love now, what NBA Top Shot did is, with these NFTs and things like that, now we're able to get these digital highlight clips that the Gen Zers and the younger people really love those clips. Well, we're able to use the entire game to get those clips. And now these big media companies can use those clips to sell them, right? And that's what's been happening. This is why I love what NBA Top Shot has done. So there's really good things going on. I know that, they say that the attention span is less and Gen Zers aren't really watching games as much, but you still have to have the games to have the highlights, and you still have to have the highlights to feed my ego when I'm playing. So anyway, but seriously, but I get really excited about what's going on in the world now.
And on that, Patrick, you did something really interesting with fan-controlled football and created a way to engage viewers even more so. What do you think about all of this?
I think first of all, I could listen to Andre read the phone book. Like, I honestly let him just talk the entire panel. I think I push back a little bit on the idea that that there's a shorter attention span. I mean, look, literally, I can point to any millennial on the planet or Gen Z and watch them play 4 hours of Fortnite. It's the type of content that that's put in front of them, and I think that's what we saw. Last season with fan control football was that literally, for folks who don't know, that it's Madden in real life. Fans choose everything that goes on and determines everything that happens on the field. They're determining rosters, they're calling plays in real life. And so, I think if you're providing that lean forward experience and, in other kind of more traditional sports, that second screen experience, if you're providing the ways that fans can engage and that younger audience can do that that they'll pay attention for a much longer span of time. So I'd push back on the fact that it's a shorter attention span. It's the type of content that's in front of them.
Is anyone doing it right? And I kind of open that up to anyone to weigh in. George, I see your hand raised. Do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I would just say that I think what you're seeing is going to see a change. We're talking about all these new technologies that allow people to engage with consumers. Absolutely. And you are going to see audiences get smaller on linear television. People are going to experience things different ways. And what I think the world's going is shifting to the more importance of the lifetime value of the customer. What does that mean? Or give you an example. So we run the NFL OTT in 181 countries. And, for a long time, the NFL looked at, what do I get per subscriber? And really didn't look at the lifetime value of the consumer. And so when you think about laddering up and different pricing options, your engagement with the consumer is much greater. And in the end, it's the relationship with the consumer that you're going to monetize. Giving an example further, like NFL Game Pass, today we sell 20 games plus the playoffs. Someday we're going to be selling services and products and placing bets on NFL Game Pass. So it's that interaction and the value of the engagement with the consumer that leagues and properties over time are going to monetize. And I actually think that might be even greater than what the business is today, but it's going to change over time. And the value has to be placed on how strong is that connection, which is all the technologies that everybody is talking to, the engagement, and how do you monetize it? That to me is the future of sports.
Scott, you work for NBA, the NBA. We're in the middle of the NBA playoffs here. How do you think the league has been doing on some of these points that we've been talking about, sort of engaging new viewers and really pushing it forward to increase people's viewership?
First, I'd like to encourage Andre to watch the first quarter of the Atlanta Hawks game. Everything Trey Young does at the first quarter. You don't want to watch just those last 30 seconds. You're going to be busy. So
you went there.
We've been focused on this for a long time. In NBA, we are a leader in social media. We've adopted technologies early on and our following now. We have 20 billion social followers around the world across all of our platforms. And if you look just in the first round, we had over 100 million views on YouTube. So our audience is engaged. And I also completely agree with Patrick's point that, what we're finding is once millennials, Gen Z, when they find the content, they will watch long form content. In fact, that's what they want. And it's just got to be compelling content. And they're flipping around because people are not keeping them connected to what's interesting. So I guess MLB is not on the game, but, let's say if you're watching a Major League Baseball game, there's a lot of time to pick your phone up and see what else is going on in between pitches or in between innings. So it's our job as content providers. I know we got an NFL, we got NBA, nobody from MLB, so it's an easy target. But the key is to make sure that you're continuously feeding a variety of different content, making sure that they're staying engaged. Our players, it's a tremendous asset for us. Our players are incredibly authentic and creative in this space. So, while the league is doing a lot, our players are doing even more than us, given the volume, the number of them, and that working with them to create more content and making sure it's widely dispersed is what's made us so successful up to now.
Paul, Andre, can you guys both speak to that? Because you're both, Paul, you're a current player, Andre, you're a former player. How much is the onus sort of on the players to engage with viewers to continue to push forward the digitization of the sports industry?
Yeah, I'll take first shot at it.
Yeah.
And we structure our league to take advantage of what I think as players is closest to the bottom of the funnel of all the properties when it comes to sport, bottom of the funnel of communicating with fans on ticket sales to tune in to sponsorship engagement. And that's been the biggest shift in the social media era, is giving talent not only a voice, but in many cases a larger audience, an opportunity to build a larger audience than the teams and the leagues themselves. So we structure our player contracts to not only have our players involved in what I had mentioned, but our players also have stock options so that they can benefit from that rising tide of league, team accounts, and players in unison, and what I call creating a bottleneck on the news feed of all these social platforms. So super important. Athletes need to feel compensated in doing such. And one more comment on the broader trend as I listen to all these experts talk, is that consumption is actually up. It's way up. And if you take consumption, it's total viewership across all mediums, it's interaction, which interaction didn't really exist in the linear age. So that's a good thing. And to your kind of broader question, what's going to happen next is we're going to see media and networks in particular, alter the way that they're structuring deals with leagues. And we just saw a wave of big deals come through. Wayne mentioned the NFLs. But as everyone is challenged to monetize or chase the kind of free or earned media they're getting from social and figure out how to monetize that, I think it's a restructuring of the way the networks are cutting deals with the properties. It used to be, from the consumer's standpoint, in the broadcast cable era, like a New Year's Eve menu, all you can eat, and you don't get a choice. We have 250 channels that we pay $250 for, and we watch 5 of them. Now we've just shifted to an a la carte menu. The pricing will net out, but the shift in power has gone to the consumer, and now it's incumbent on the networks in relationship with the properties to be where they are.
Wayne, Elise, I'd love you both to jump in here.
Well, Elise, go ahead.
Okay, well, there's so much to unpack, but one of the things I think is really, really critical, it was both what George and Paul were just talking about, honestly, is the power's in the hands of the consumer. And I'm always saying that, first-party data is the currency of choice for sports properties in the sports ecosystem. And when you know who your consumers are, you can monetize them. So to George's point and to Paul's point, today's ecosystems have essentially, in many respects, mortgaged that one-to-one consumer access to their digital platforms, which is where fresh audiences live. And I always joke when when a team comes to me and says, I just got 1 million, likes on my Facebook post, I'm like, good for Facebook, because that's the classic disintermediation. Facebook knows who those consumers are, but the sports properties don't. And all of these stakeholders in the world of sports properties want access to that cleansed, structured first-party data, and those teams and properties don't have that. Any technology that helps these teams and these sports properties and these broadcasters understand who those consumers are, that is where the ROI is driven. That is where the future of monetizing, and the LTV comes into monetizing a consumer. When you know who that is, you can monetize them. And that is the critical next steps, I believe, for sports properties in the sports ecosystem, the ability to do that.
Wayne?
Yeah, Lise, I mean, I completely agree with you. And that's what we find so exciting at 76 Capital about investing in the entrepreneurs who are truly changing and pushing and innovating the whole sports industry. Because these kinds of this data, this type of analytics, all this information that's now available, that's out there, that's the opportunity to build a next generation company. And to tie on the question you had before, Jennifer, about that you mentioned to Paul and Andre about athletes, I mean, that's one of the big things, and part of our overall thesis at 76 Capital is that, you can't just invest in a sports related company if you don't have an athlete or a coach with you. It's like investing in a biotech company without a doctor or a scientist. I mean, I don't get it. It's one of the things that I know, Paul and I have talked about for years. I mean, we got to get the athletes in the room with the entrepreneurs to create, if we're really going to create something amazing within the sports industry, because they are, guys like Andre and Paul have played at the highest of levels. And there's so much information, there's so much experience and so many things that they can tell us about the kinds of companies and things that we're building to try to make sport even better.
Yeah, Andre, I'd love to hear your take too.
Yeah, so question that you asked earlier, you asked, a company that was out here that's just kind of doing the future of digital media now. Like, I got to shout it out to them, that Fan Control Football is doing it right. All right. And it's not because, our group, we are investors in Fan Control Football, but I've been to the games and I've just seen just what they've done from, just like what Wayne just said, is not only just creating a business, but also bringing athletes on as owners, right? Like, Marshawn Lynch is one of the owners. And it was so cool. When I was at one of the games, Marshawn was there. Marshawn, since he's an owner, says, you know what? I'm deciding that I'm going to suit up for this game and go play, right? And he went down there and went in the locker room and suited up. And he could have played, but he said, you know what? I don't want to take one of the spotlight from one of the players out there. I've had my time. Let him have it. But the cool part is he could have done that because it's his league. He's part owner. So, that's the first thing. The second thing, again, I get excited because when I was playing in the NFL, we used to have this saying, the media is the devil. Okay, I'll say it again. The media is the devil. Okay, and so we used to always say that the media is not your friend. And, you got to watch out for what you say. But nowadays, athletes, we say it now, like, look, I am the media. Seriously, like, I create my own content. I create my own platform. And there's going to be a day, which is coming really, really soon, that athletes are going to say, well, why am I posting, just like what Elise said, why am I posting on Facebook when I can post on my own platform, right? And have my own system. Why am I posting on Instagram? Why am I getting Instagram followers? Why don't I get Fluellen followers, right? Like, have my own system. And so I really like where the trend is going, not just for the businesses out there, but the athletes who are thinking more entrepreneurial are saying, look, let's just start our own platforms. We have the influence, we have the capital, and we got people that want to be around us. All right. So those three things, you can get a lot done. So that's why what we do at Beyond the Game Network is we're just a group of athletes and business executives that come together to do stuff as a team. And I really see the trend of that happening in sports, period.
Does it also potentially open the door, and George, I'd love for you to weigh in, open the door to, you're talking about athletes being in the room, lesser known athletes who maybe aren't a Marshawn Lynch or someone like that, or even on a global front for more people to get to know lesser known sports, like Paul, you play lacrosse. I mean, I'm just curious if you guys have any take on that.
I think definitely going direct to consumer now allows more sports, allows more athletes, a platform that didn't exist. Essentially, the broadcaster was determined who was going to watch and what you're going to watch. Now the consumer does. So the technology is allowing people in sports, take the World Surf League, take any sport, and now has an opportunity. If you can get 100 or 200,000 subscribers to pay, you've got a business. Where before you'd have to do a time buy, hope somebody watched, and hope you could grind your way through it. The one other point I would make is, what's unique and you think about the size of the opportunity and something we're quite focused in following up on Paul and Elise, if you think about it, sports was primarily linear television, which was B to B to C. And also the other big stream is tickets, which was really outsourced to brokers and other third parties. Therefore, the sports properties really never had the expertise, the consumer marketing expertise that's needed to get that lifetime relationship with the consumer. And so there's an enormous business opportunity filling that void. And I think the people in sports that do that better than others are going to succeed faster. And one last thing, that because younger people are consuming content differently and it's more tech related and engagement related, you're also going to get a leg up on a younger consumer that's not going to be consuming content on a linear fashion. And there's just a huge void and expertise. And it's one of the things we look to invest in is filling that void and helping accelerate the growth of the properties.
Elise?
So to tack on to what George just said and expand on that a little bit is this concept of the old sports model and the new sports model. And so legacy sports still operate on that old sports model for the most part, linear rights holders and brands as sponsors. And so think about the consumption habits of these fresh audiences are driving this new model, which is really digital rights holders and brands as advertisers. The same brands who are sponsors are also advertisers, right? So when a Toyota, as an example, right, is a digital advertiser, they will pay a specific CPM to reach that target audience through an advertising technology stack. And it's very, very efficient and cost effective. So brands want the same experience as a sponsor in sports as they do as a digital advertiser. But because sports don't know who those consumers are, you go back to the same problem of how can I deliver value? And so these brands, which are the lifeblood of sports in the world of sponsors, it used to be category exclusivity. There was a car. Now there's three cars. There's the truck division, there's the luxury division, and there's the economy division. So this whole platform of old versus new is being upended, and that really is being driven by these fresh audiences that consume, but they just consume differently. And to George's point, the smartest ones are the ones who are going to recognize the value of the athletes, deliver equity to those athletes, and monetize the hell out of this new audience in a way that matters to them.
I feel like that was a little nod to Paul.
Yeah, well, I'll say one thing, maybe two, but one is that the valuation methodology is changing on the rights packages. So we've been saying a lot of LTV, lifetime value. That's a subscription metric, and that's what the MVPDs or the cable service providers were valuing in their affiliate deals with the networks. Now the networks are launching their own streaming platforms and they're building their own subscription services. So the lifetime value methodology that they're going actually bodes well for long tail sports, because there is unlimited programming windows on streaming, which is different than a fixed number of windows on the linear era. And then number two is they're valuing your property in the tens of thousands. If you can drive 100,000 plus subscriptions, that's super valuable, but it's also much more attainable for long tail sports to do that than being in the fight with the legacy leagues to drive tens of millions of viewers, in some cases a game if you're the NFL. So that valuation methodology has changed, and it benefits new entrants like ours, Fan Control Football League and such. The last thing I'll say is what's amazing about being in the business of sports on the property side, and why we're now hearing a lot more language around enterprise, is that yes, we need to figure out monetization of the views and the interactions that are happening. But sometimes we need to realize that we already are. And the benefit of being a property is it's not just media rights that's driving revenue. It's not just sponsorship. You're selling tickets. Merchandise is huge. If you look overseas, in some cases for EPL teams, merchandise is their second largest revenue driver. They're updating kits every year. They have alternate kits. And it's a thing in the culture to buy your new kit every year. Right. So that's the fourth. And then what we're seeing with a lot of leagues, and we do it with our academy, and MLS just announced their latest MLS Next, is your youth business. So there's all these different ways to figure out monetization, which isn't just tagged to a price tag for someone who's watching your product, whether it's on social, digital, or linear.
Scott, does all of this bode well for the NBA? I mean, the NBA is huge, it's a massive league. But do you see these technological advances and the way viewers are engaging just continuing to help the NBA grow?
Absolutely. Our audience is very young. Our median age is in the 30s. They're active on social media. They're gamers. They're into music. They're into fashion, technology. And again, I go back to our players. Those are the things our players do. So when they're spending time in the things that they enjoy, they're bringing a new audience into the game. Even if they don't consume the live game, there are so many ways for them to engage. And because there are so many different outlets and so many different forms of content, we're able to engage with them and hopefully move them to the live game, and they'll be able to experience that as well. Whether they do that, in a linear fashion on our OTT platform, NBA League Pass, or really on House of Highlights, or any other way that we determine to distribute our content, it'll work. And take an example in Brazil, for example. I think going back to Elise's point, we've basically, our media partner there is Budweiser. And we put our games on YouTube, and that's where people access the game. So Budweiser's not buying ads. They're our media partner, and they're the ones that are helping us create the content and distribute that to make sure that their brand is being seen alongside the NBA, a completely different way than they've ever done it.
And Scott, I feel like it's important to note that you are EVP of NBA Asia. So you are in a market where live games are not even being played. Do you still see viewers there, though, interested and engaging with the league, given they don't have the ability to go to an arena and watch the games?
Yes, it helps that everybody, basketball is an indigenous sport in virtually every country in the world. So we do not have to go out and teach people how to play or to understand the game. We may have to teach them how to play a little better, make sure there's an ecosystem of coaching so that kids will learn how to play. And then, there is a pathway for them to be able to achieve the highest levels. We have that now with, Rui Hachimura and Yuta Watanabe coming out of Japan. We have players from Australia, Principal Singh from India playing in the G League. So we want to make sure you can come out of any country in the world and ultimately become an NBA player. But, we look at geography, we look at accessibility, we look at consumer behavior in each of these countries, depending on the median age, the economics, and make sure that our content is available in the right form at the right time. And, on the local platforms in the country, if, Facebook and YouTube are ubiquitous around the world, but in each country, there's a few other platforms that we're working with that are very specific to those countries as well.
Mm. And Patrick, I want to bring you in talking about different platforms. I mean, what's next for fan-controlled football? What is it that you are focusing on?
Growth. I was going to shout out just a second ago. You asked a little bit about new technologies, and I wanted to shout out Scott actually in the NBA in the sense that we are a league purpose built for Twitch, right? Again, the interactivity is our ethos, and so we built a lot of the technologies around ways fans can interact on Twitch. And I think when we set out to do that, we looked at who else is doing what on platform, and then the NBA did a really good job with the G League and using kind of that Twitch extension platform, which is a visual overlay that sits on top of the games and allows fans to interact. I was obviously really excited about what they were doing. But yeah, we're obtusely focused on season 2 and growth. We're adding 4 new teams this coming season. And then, we are fan controlled sports and entertainment. So sports is plural. So we're looking at other sports at the moment. So a lot more to come.
And I want to just do a round robin and talk to everybody about what you think is next. I mean, obviously, we're still in the middle of the pandemic, and so consuming sports is a little bit different than it might be. But I'm just curious to get all of your takes about sort of what you're watching next. Maybe, Wayne, we'll start with you. We haven't heard from you in a few minutes.
Sure. Well, look, that's what we're all about at 76 Capital is what's next. Investing in the entrepreneurs that are doing the next thing, right? So whether it's augmented reality, whether it's new type of engagement from a media perspective, whether it's, all the new things that are happening within sports betting. For us, that's such a big focus of what we do here at 76 Capital, investing in those entrepreneurs who are building those businesses. That's something that we think is just we're just scratching the surface here in America, where we have 30 states that have legalized sports betting plus Puerto Rico and DC. So we're not even fully there yet, and there's so much opportunity there. And then I can't neglect to say what's next from an esports perspective, and from look, that's an area when we were touched a little bit on youth side of things. I mean, the youth side of esports is really fascinating. It's kind of like an upside down model here in the U.S. where we kind of have the pro levels and colleges, and but the youth side is an area which is you really need to build, and that's something that we're really deeply involved with one of our companies called Nerd Street Gamers. But I mean, these are things that we're just so excited about with the growth of sports. And what we'll say, I'll say it, I'll put it out there. I mean, to this kind of an audience, I believe that the biggest industry over the next 10 years in North America is sports. Period.
Wow. Andre, do you have anything to say on that front?
Absolutely, yeah. So I really think the future is the Paul brothers, Jake and Logan Paul, really showed me something. And I know it seems like a lot of people say what they've done is bad for sports. I am seriously, because you got to think about it. Now it's made the average person an athlete now, and the ability to compete with other athletes. And shout out to the Topo Chico that you're drinking over there, Patrick. But anyway,
it's delicious. Have you guys tried this?
I love it.
Hooked.
Sorry, but yeah, so what they did though, again, they made just a regular person, a YouTuber fighting Floyd Mayweather. And so I think that the future, we're going to see more like this. And I think it's good, not just for sports, but it's for the younger generation too, because they identify with these people, right? Identify with these guys. So I think there's even bigger opportunities for regular, quote unquote, average Joes to start being able to link up with these superstar athletes, and both parties making substantial, making it income for themselves. So I think about it like that. I know a lot of people don't like what the Paul brothers did, but I really look up to them because they created something that we really haven't seen before.
I'm sure they'll appreciate that. No, I think that's a really important point. Just opening up audiences that maybe we didn't know. Elise, I also wanted to ask you, what do you think is next, and how could this technological revolution, we were talking about it before the stream, but potentially help female athletes, right? Just having access to things that they didn't before.
Well, I think it's both female athletes as well as women, and obviously members of the BIPOC community who are engaged in both the front end side of sports as well as female athletes. From a female athlete standpoint, athletes as influencers, which is humanizing the athlete and giving them the opportunity to connect directly with their audiences. They are influencers, whether they are professional athletes or whether they're amateur athletes. And there are platforms such as, Obsesh and Cameo and a whole host of other platforms that engage and enable these athletes to bring their followings and literally monetize their following. So that is one way that athletes or lesser known athletes and even lesser known sports have the ability to kind of stake their claim. And then the other side from a technical aspect is the brain power that comes with the ability to drive technologies in delivering new application for sports. That brain power is universal. It's men, it's women, they come from, wherever their education is, they have thought processes. They take those thought processes, they put them into companies. Those companies are then, they are funded by the likes of Wayne, and they're funded by the likes of George. And then all of a sudden you have this enormous network of brain power that is solving problems in the world of sports. And it's only going to get bigger and better.
I love that. Hey, Paul, can you jump in here?
Yeah, as I'm listening to all these experts talk, it's stimulated some thoughts. So I jotted down some notes. Why not make some predictions on the Qatar Economic Forum? So here we go. So broadcast, I feel formerly, known as cable subscribers, will trim down to 50 million and probably level there. And that's a good business. Right now, annually, the advertising business is 70 billion a year, down from 100. But we're tracking the cable cutting or the cord cutting. That's where I think broadcast will net out. Broadcast is still really powerful and doing well. Cable, outside of the top 20 most viewed annually, gets tucked into streaming. We're going to see more of the media conglomerates close down their cable channels and tuck them, the those properties and that IP into their streaming platforms. We're going to see a ton of M&A. We just saw the Warner Media spin out. If you don't have broadcast O&O, you're in trouble. I think Apple or Netflix is also going to buy Viacom CBS. I made that prediction on one of my blogs that people don't read. And larger AGOs, so the authorized gaming operators, they will purchase and are continuing to try to purchase media rights and compete with the networks. I think they're going to fall short because they don't have the blue chip pedigree or the broadcast O&O. So they'll either be bought by the media conglomerates or they will buy them, and expect the media conglomerates to build their own books. And the last one, which I think related to the near term and what we've been talking about, is just, I agree. I don't think Gen Zs are lower attention span. They're just nurtured differently than us. So they're growing up with shorter bite-sized content. And so that's what they want. We grew up with live sports in 2-hour windows, and that's what we wanted. So I think to get them, we just have to produce the games differently. Because right now, YouTube highlights of games stretch sometimes 20 to 30 minutes, and the watch time is its entirety, but it's chopped up highlights. So that's how they're consuming. So the networks are going to start producing the games differently, and I think they'll see, better total audience delivery.
George, do you agree with that?
Yeah,
That's a lot of predictions, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah,
I don't get many opportunities to make them.
I'm going to go read the blog. I'm telling you, I did subscribe
I'll go
right
on
now.
mute.
I think the thing to look at, things I'm looking at, are regional sports in America, regional sports networks. It's a meaningful revenue stream to teams, and I think it's going to be under siege, just like Paul mentioned. So I think watching that transition from the old model to the new model and what that means financially is something to watch. I think gambling and gaming here in the U.S. is going to be an exploding market. You also have the Olympics and the World Cup coming to the United States in this decade. I think people have forgot that because of the pandemic. That's going to be on us before you know it. I also think it's interesting when you look at NFTs. I mean, Topps actually transacted, been for sale for a long time, transacted on the back of really the NFT phenomenon. I know Panini's looking at different options now, again, based on the NFT phenomenon. So what happens with that? Is that a fad, or is that something that has real legs? And then lastly, I think when you look outside the U.S., how some of these sports and federations navigate their way out of the financial challenges that the pandemic presented. Right now in the French Football League, you have real issues there. So how these international federations navigate the impact of the pandemic, those are the things I'm watching.
Absolutely. That's important to remember. We didn't even really get to talk about Euro 2020, which is going on right now. Patrick, I'll give you the last word before we close out the session.
Wow, what a so definitely subscribing to Paul's blog before we go, and Andre, well, I'll connect you with Marshawn ASAP, because I think that needs to happen. Look, I think what's next, and so obviously we've been really focused on the gamification of being a fan, right? Allowing fans to, again, that lean forward, whether it's betting, whether it's competing against each other, and so we're really focused on how can we deliver those experiences where it's gamified, and whether that it definitely will lead to monetization, but pulling folks through that funnel and allowing them to compete against each other, and really redefine what it means to be a fan, what that relationship is with athletes, and whatnot. So.
That's great. Scott, I forgot to get your take on this. Last one.
No worries. It really is, I think Patrick has it right behind him. It's fan control. We are looking for more microphones, more camera angles, more streams. We're working with a company called Kisway that, with very minimal communication, you can be a caster. Right? You just need a little bit of an equipment, put it in your home, and you can be a caster, and then you could have your 20 friends. They're watching the game with you as the commentator, or really anywhere. There's a limitless number of streams that could be going out there. So, making sure that the consumer has what they want in their experience and hearing, making sure it's available. That's really, I think, going to be one of our key focuses for the future.
Wow. I mean, I think the general consensus is that the consumer is really sort of taking the power. But this is it's all sounding pretty good and pretty positive for sports as a whole. So I want to thank all of you for being here and just talking us through this really fascinating discussion. George, Patrick, Paul, Wayne, Andre, Scott, and Elise, you guys are all experts, and I'm so glad that you could be with us for the Qatar Forum today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
You crushed it.
Thanks, guys.